They erased me, replaced me, and built a legacy on my designs. But tonight I returned with receipts with influence and a blueprint for their ruin. I sat in the black sedan parked beneath the fiery red maples, watching thin October mist curl through the evening air. The chill crept into my shirt cuffs, but I didn't shiver. 9 years changes a man. 9 years hardens him. Through the windshield, Fairwood Heights. Country Club materialized exactly as I remembered it. Unchanged and unchangeable marble steps ascending like some modern temple. Topiary trimmed to mathematical perfection. Golden light spilling from tall windows like liquid wealth itself. I adjusted my cufflinks compass and square the architect's ancient symbols. Once those symbols had been mine by right, then they were taken along with everything else. The invitation in my pocket wasn't meant for me. The Urban Leap Nonprofits intermediary had made that abundantly clear. My name, Silas Knox. Wren wasn't on any guest list maintained by the Routhford family, but that hadn't stopped me from securing a platinum-level donor badge and board member credentials. "Sir, may I see your invitation?" The doorman's voice carried practiced deference with just a hint of suspicion. I produced the embossed card bearing my full name, watching his eyes widen slightly at the platinum designation. He hesitated, checking his tablet before reluctantly stepping aside with a forced smile. "Welcome to the Urban Futures Gala, Mr. Wren." Walking through those doors felt like being a ghost returning to the house that had once rejected you without bothering to knock. A visceral, almost supernatural sensation settled in my chest as I crossed the threshold into a world that had explicitly written me out of existence. Inside, soft jazz floated through the air beneath crystal chandeliers that threw prismatic light across the crowd. Satin gowns and bespoke tuxedos clustered around champagne stations. The unmistakable scent of money hung in the air, expensive perfumes, polished leather privilege. I strode across the marble floor, a floor I'd helped design years ago. They'd kept my pattern, but removed my name from every document, every blueprint, every record. I wondered if anyone remembered. I wondered if she remembered. Near the central bar, I spotted Madeline Routhford, tall, imperious, with a triple strand of pearls gracing her neck. Her eyes were cold as surgical steel when they locked onto mine. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't bother with discretion. "What is this failure doing here?" She announced loud enough for nearby conversations to halt. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't meant to be. It was a knife thrown with practiced precision intended to draw blood and an audience. Classic Madeline. I didn't answer. I simply smiled slowly, deliberately, with the precision of a scalpel making its first incision. Across the room stood Julianne Routhford, my ex-wife. Now a fashion icon according to the society pages, she was surrounded by women in Dior and Givenchy, laughing at something clearly fascinating. Then she turned, caught my gaze. Her expression didn't change, not even a flicker. "You're not on the list," she said, her voice flat as a weather report. "Perhaps your list needs updating." I replied, quiet but clear enough to reach her across the 12 feet between us. She arched a perfect eyebrow, then turned away as if I were some strange anomaly in her otherwise perfect evening, a smudge on her immaculate reality. Around us, whispers rippled through the crowd. "Is that Silas Wren? I thought he disappeared." "Didn't he?" Fragments of confusion, recognition scandal. Some donors looked at me with dawning recollection, as if remembering something they'd been told to forget. I didn't reach for a drink, didn't sample the canapes. I simply stood where I knew I would be most visible, not asking to be seen, but forcing them to see me. A staff member approached cautiously, handing me a gala program. With subtle deference, I flipped it open to the list of board members and platinum patrons. There it was printed in elegant serif type: Silas Knox Wren, Clay and Wren Urban Studio, platinum patron. I turned, catching Julianne's gaze again across the room. Her hand tightened almost imperceptibly around her champagne flute. Madeline's face drained of color. I knew then that I had become the ghost they couldn't exorcise. And this time, I hadn't come empty-handed. Standing there at the gala, watching Julianne's practiced indifference, I couldn't help but remember how different things had been 10 years ago when she used to look at me like I was the answer to questions she hadn't even thought to ask. We met at an urban art symposium at the university. She was presenting fabric installations that transformed public spaces. I was there to discuss sustainable architectural interventions. Julianne wore a handmade dress with sketches of buildings stitched into the hem. I wore my only decent blazer with elbow patches. We argued passionately about whether form should follow function or emotion should dictate design. 3 hours later, we were still talking over coffee in a corner cafe as rain drummed against the windows. "You see the bones of things?" she told me that night. "I see their skin." 2 years later. We were married. I was 27. She was 25. We moved into a small loft in East Lake, all exposed brick and massive windows that let in sheets of light. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Every Sunday we'd sketch together at our kitchen table, her designs flowing like water mines, structured like steel frameworks. When Julianne decided to launch her first fashion boutique, I designed it for her on a napkin while we ate street tacos. She squealed with delight at my concept, a space where the walls seemed to fold like fabric, drawing customers deeper into her world. I handled everything. The books, lease negotiations, building the physical models, overseeing construction. While Julianne became the brand, we were a perfect team. At least that's what I believed. Her family never saw it that way. The Ruthfords viewed me as a temporary accessory, something Julianne would outgrow. At her first industry party, Madeline Rutherford cornered me by the champagne. "You said Margiela wrong," she informed me, her voice dripping with amusement. "It's Margiela, not Margiela. Details matter in this world, Silas." Erwin was worse. At their annual summer gala, he introduced me to his business partner as Silas, Julianne's old boyfriend. "He does little drawings now." I was standing right there, wedding ring glinting under the lights. Architectural awards recently added to my resume. Julianne never directly defended me. Once I overheard her describing me to a fashion editor as my inspiration architect, like a raw wind blowing through the fashion world. I thought it was a declaration of love. Later, I recognized it for what it was. The first reframing of my role in her ascent. The cracks appeared slowly then, all at once. Julianne stopped consulting me about business decisions. She hired staff, purchased new locations, expanded her brand, all without my input. I'd discover new developments when I saw her name in the business section with no mention of my contributions. "It's just easier this way," she'd say when I questioned her. "You're busy with your own projects," except I wasn't. My architectural practice had taken a back seat to supporting her growing empire. The projects I did take on were carefully selected to allow me enough time to manage her business affairs. The final party, celebrating 5 years of her company, was the clearest signal I wasn't invited to speak. Instead, I stood near a speaker while industry insiders praised Julianne's singular vision. She accepted their adulation without once acknowledging my presence, let alone my partnership. That night I returned home to darkness. The door code didn't work. I assumed it was a technical glitch until I walked around back and found my luggage neatly arranged on a stone bench. My phone buzzed with a text from Julianne. "You'll land on your feet, I believe in you." I called her, no answer. 15 minutes later, Erwin's black Aston Martin pulled up. He stepped out, tie loosened, face impassive. "This is better for everyone," he said flatly. "Don't call again." Then came the systematic erasure. Her company website removed my name from the co-founder section overnight. Photos featuring me at the launch disappeared from their social media. My work email access was terminated. Industry contacts stopped returning my messages. Mutual friends unfollowed me on social media as if responding to some central directive. I spent 3 nights sleeping in my car in a Walmart parking lot jacket. Bunched up as a pillow, I told myself it was temporary. By the 3rd night, curled up in the back seat as teenagers shouted across the lot. I admitted the truth. I had nothing left. My reputation, my work, my home, my marriage, all gone in a coordinated strike so efficient it could only have been planned for months. Finally, I called Terrence Duvall, an old classmate from architecture school. He opened his door at 2 a.m. without questions, just nodded at my single suitcase and pointed to his couch. "Stay as long as you need," was all he said. The following months, I took whatever work I could find, delivering pizzas, drafting backyard designs for wealthy homeowners, painting advertising murals on brick walls. I existed in a fog of humiliation and disbelief. The man who had once designed award-winning spaces was now sketching patio layouts for weekend warriors. 6 months into this new reality. Terrence slapped a flyer onto my makeshift drafting table. "Go to this," he said, pointing at a community design exhibition. "Hang some of your sketches. Someone might notice." I stared at the half-finished design I was working on, a concept for urban housing that integrated public gardens throughout the structure, and made a decision. This would be my last attempt. After this, if nothing changed, I'd accept my fall and stop reaching for a life that had been deliberately taken from me. Little did I know that exhibition would become the first foundation stone of a structure more enduring than anything I'd ever designed before. The community design exhibition was held in a repurposed factory space with concrete floors and exposed pipes. I arrived with 5 architectural sketches printed on A3 paper, thumbtacked to a rented display board. My station was positioned next to a table offering free pens without dedicated lighting. The space had the desperate energy of dreamers and outcasts, a far cry from the polished galleries where I once presented alongside Julianne. My most prominent design was titled Community Route, an integrated housing library playground complex designed as a seamless urban ecosystem. The concept reimagined public housing as something that could be both beautiful and functional, incorporating natural light wells that doubled as climbing spaces for children. I had sketched it during my darkest nights sleeping in my car, perhaps as a way to design myself a home when I no longer had one. While most attendees passed by with cursory glances, one man stopped and studied my designs for over 5 minutes. He had salt and pepper hair, wore a weathered leather jacket, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd weathered storms. "You draw these?" he finally asked, eyes still on the community route design. "Just preliminary sketches," I replied, trying not to sound desperate for validation. "I'm Taryn Clay," he said, extending a calloused hand. "I have a small development project that's stuck in budget hell, but needs vision. Interested in taking a shot." 2 days later, I found myself in Taryn's office, a converted garage with mismatched furniture and exceptional coffee. Architectural magazines were stacked in precise towers, and detailed models of modest but striking buildings occupied every surface. "Here's the deal," he said, spreading out maps of a neighborhood called West Glen, low-income housing project. The city's allocated minimal funds. Developers have submitted uninspired boxes that technically meet requirements. I want something better. No contract, no formal agreement. Just his word. Draft a design. If it's good, we'll continue. I worked for 48 straight hours, sleeping only when my eyes couldn't focus on the screen. I submitted the design via email, then spent a week delivering pizzas expecting nothing. When Taryn called, his voice was different, energized. They loved it. The community board actually applauded. "We start the next project tomorrow." Over the next 6 months, we tackled 4 small projects, converting an abandoned grocery store into a community center, reimagining a derelict park, renovating a crumbling daycare. We worked nights, our makeshift drafting table, a wooden crate, hand-brewed coffee, our fuel-weak yellow lamps, our only illumination. One night, as we finalized plans for a senior living center, Taryn looked up from his coffee. "You can't keep being the guy behind the curtain," he said plainly. "You need your name on these buildings." The next day, Clay and Wren Urban Studio was born, not with fanfare but with a simple website and business cards printed at the local copy shop. I developed a distinctive design approach that became our signature, maximizing natural light through unexpected angles, integrating green spaces not as afterthoughts, but as structural elements, repurposing industrial materials that carried both history and symbolic weight. Our buildings weren't just functional, they were dignified spaces that made ordinary people feel valued. After 2 years of smaller commissions, we won our first major contract in Pine Brook, transforming a failed shopping mall into an education and community hub. Local papers began mentioning Clay and Wren, the new studio breathing life into forgotten urban spaces. By our 3rd year, we'd opened a small satellite office in Asheville where we designed a community mental health center that integrated healing gardens throughout the structure. Our reputation was growing not among the elite, but among city planners who wanted buildings that actually served people. Our 5th year marked the breakthrough. We won the bid to redevelop Shiloh Yard, an abandoned industrial complex on Detroit's outskirts. The $42 million contract transformed our small studio into a recognized name in sustainable urban development. I personally designed our headquarters there, a glass structure powered by renewable energy, with a subtle inscription etched into the facade. Design is memory and form. It was my private acknowledgement of how past wounds shaped present creations. Clay and Wren began appearing in industry publications, Modern Habitat, Urbanist, Next Space. Meanwhile, I occasionally glimpsed Julianne in Vogue or Elle described as an urban fashion innovation icon, without any mention of our shared history. I never reached out, never commented. The time wasn't right. Then came a curious moment. A construction industry reporter interviewed me about the Shiloh Yard project, and mentioned that my approach to integrating fabric-like elements in structural design reminded him of Julianne Routhford's new flagship store. There's a similar fluidity in the walls, he noted, almost like the building is wearing the space, rather than containing it. I simply nodded while inwardly recognizing my own sketches, concepts I'd created years ago that had never been publicly attributed to me. I remained silent. Patience had become my most valuable tool. 8 years after being erased, an unexpected email arrived in my inbox from Urban Leap, a nonprofit focused on equitable urban development. Dear Mr. Wren, thank you for your generous contribution. We cordially invite you to attend the Urban Futures Gala as a board member and platinum patron. The event organizers, the Ruthford family. I smiled thinly at my computer screen. Perfect timing. This time I wouldn't arrive with just drawings, I'd come with the truth. The revelation came during a routine Monday meeting at Clay and Wren. Our team was reviewing potential partnerships when Maya, our community outreach coordinator, pulled up a slideshow featuring the Routhford Foundation's latest philanthropic venture. They're seeking architects for their urban revival initiative. She explained, budget is substantial and... The words died in my throat as the concept model appeared on screen. My heart contracted painfully, blood rushing in my ears. There on our conference room wall was my design, unmistakably, intimately mine. The flowing integration of living spaces with public areas. The signature light wells, the distinctive cantilevered community spaces, all from sketches I'd created years ago in our old loft apartment. Drawings I'd never published. Silas. Taryn's voice sounded distant. You okay? I nodded mechanically. Continue the presentation. Maya. That night, I drove directly to our storage facility and dug through boxes I hadn't opened in nearly a decade. In the third cardboard container beneath architectural magazines and old tax documents, I found what I was looking for, an external hard drive from my former life. Back at my apartment, I connected the drive with shaking hands. Relief flooded through me when it powered up without issue. I navigated through folders of our past until I found the original project files dated and intact. The designs matched exactly what I'd seen in the meeting, down to the distinctive curve of the central atrium. The next morning, I called our technical team into my office and laid everything out plainly. I need verification. This is my original design from 9 years ago. The Ruthford Foundation is presenting it as their new initiative. I need metadata checks, creation dates, IP logs, anything that might indicate how this happened. Our tech lead. Eliza nodded. We'll need a few days. This is delicate. 3 days later, they presented their findings. The metadata matched perfectly. More disturbing was the discovery that the project had been submitted to the Department of Urban Development using an account that had once been mine, one I'd lost access to years ago when I was systematically removed from Julianne's life. The submission was signed by Julianne Ruthford. The project description had been altered from my original community restoration initiative to feminist design heritage revival. Most damning of all was an internal email from Julianne's assistant that our team had somehow obtained. Removed Silas watermarks. Reconstructed in pastel palette. Just need to revise final page layout. I sat motionless, staring at the evidence. 9 years of silence, of rebuilding from ashes, and now this theft of the very ideas that had formed in my mind during our marriage. What do you want to do? Taryn asked quietly. Everything by the book. I replied, no shortcuts, no accusations without ironclad proof. I hired a digital forensics specialist and a copyright attorney specializing in architectural infringement. They meticulously built a case verifying the forged signature on submission documents, matching the pressure points and stroke patterns to my authentic signatures. The investigation uncovered 5 other Julianne Rutherford projects that used variations of my unpublished designs. Over 6 weeks, we compiled a comprehensive dossier. We gathered original files with verifiable metadata, and timestamps secured internal communications from Julianne's company. Through legal channels, assembled copyright registrations of my preliminary drafts, and commissioned a detailed analysis of alterations and unauthorized IP access patterns. Each piece of evidence locked into place like the structural elements of a well-designed building. With everything documented, we submitted formal complaints to the IRS Department of Urban Development and Department of Justice. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about ensuring the truth finally saw light after years in darkness. As the gala approached, our technical team encoded a presentation with side-by-side comparisons of my original designs and Julianne's altered versions. We included the legal documentation, internal emails, IP access logs, and forged signature analysis. The presentation was set to run exactly 2 minutes and 30 seconds, long enough to be irrefutable, short enough to be devastating. My assistant would activate it remotely from the AV booth during the gala's main presentation. Everything was prepared with surgical precision. The night before the event, I selected a charcoal suit with a silver-gray tie. My cufflinks bore the compass emblem, the original Clay and Wren logo I'd sketched the day we founded the company. They were a reminder of rebuilding, not just revenge. Terrence Duvall visited me that evening. He'd been there when I had nothing, sleeping on his couch as I pieced together the fragments of my life. He rested a hand on my shoulder. "Are you sure you don't want to burn them down with rage?" he asked, only half joking. I looked at the carefully arranged documents on my desk, evidence of theft. Yes, but also proof that my ideas had been worth stealing. "No," I replied, my voice steady. "I want them to smash their own faces in front of the entire world." I didn't need to shout, I had the truth. As I drove to the gala the following evening, I thought about how different this return would be from my departure. 9 years ago, I'd left with a suitcase on a stone bench. I was returning with evidence that couldn't be dismissed, credentials that couldn't be questioned, and a reputation they could no longer erase. Sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't a scream. It's a whisper backed by irrefutable facts. The main hall of Fairwood Heights was a cathedral to excess. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen fireworks, casting prismatic light across gilded ceilings designed to evoke Versailles. The walls bore hand-applied damask patterns in gold and cream. Each table was a curated installation, rather than a simple dining surface. Floral sculptures rising from hand-blown glass vessels, each place setting arranged with architectural precision. The city's elite moved through the space like exotic birds in a sanctuary. Tech moguls, politicians seeking photo opportunities, fashion icons parading the season's latest collections. Their wealth was a tangible presence as real as the marble beneath their feet. Massive banners proclaimed, "Urban Leap Gala, rebuilding communities through design and vision." In smaller but still prominent lettering, principal sponsor Rutherford Foundation, and lead designer Julianne Rutherford. I moved through security without incident, my platinum donor credentials granting access that no one dared question. A young staff member escorted me to a VIP table positioned at the left of the stage, ironically, a perfect vantage point for what would unfold. The effect of my presence rippled through the crowd like a stone dropped in still water. Conversations halted mid-sentence as recognition dawned. Guests whispered behind cocktail napkins, stealing glances as if I were a ghost, materialized in their carefully curated reality. "Isn't that... I thought he was... Did you know he was..." Madeline Rutherford spotted me from across the room. Her hand tightened around her wrist knuckles, whitening beneath her diamonds. Julianne engaged in animated conversation with a group of admirers, faltered mid-sentence. Her hand moved unconsciously to adjust her dress-attelle. I recognized from our years together her signal of unexpected discomfort. Only Erwin Rutherford seemed unsurprised. He acknowledged me with the slightest nod, his eyes never leaving his brandy snifter. The old fox had likely already calculated potential scenarios and prepared contingencies. Julianne approached my table with practiced grace, her smile fixed, but her eyes scanning for threats. "I thought you'd lost interest in public events," she said, her voice attempting lightness but landing somewhere closer to caution. "I sponsor what I believe in," I replied evenly. "Even when it happens in a room full of silk-wrapped serpents." Madeline appeared at her daughter's side. Eyes narrowed like a raptor sighting prey. "We don't typically invite outsiders," she said, the final word delivered like a diagnosis. I touched the credential hanging around my neck. Silas Knox Wren, Urban Leap Board member. Unfortunate oversight. The evening progressed according to schedule until the main presentation. The MC welcomed Julianne to the stage with flourish spotlights catching her silver-embroidered gown, as applause thundered through the hall. She stepped to the microphone with the confidence of someone who believed herself untouchable. "Architecture doesn't just build structures," she began, her voice rich with practiced emotion. "It builds hope. It creates possibility where before there was only emptiness." Behind her massive screens displayed renderings of the Renewal Arc, her revolutionary design that would transform urban blight into community prosperity. The audience murmured appreciatively as she detailed innovative elements, the same elements I had sketched in our loft nearly a decade earlier. As she reached her conclusion, voice rising with performative passion, she delivered her final line: "These designs represent my soul poured out for our community." That was my cue. Without hesitation, I rose and walked directly to the stage. No one stopped me. My board member credentials and the confidence of my stride created the illusion of belonging. The MC froze, uncertain how to respond to this unscheduled addition. The audience collectively held their breath. Julianne stepped back half a pace, lips parting but producing no sound. I took the microphone with calm deliberation. "I'm Silas Knox Wren, co-founder of Clay & Wren Urban Studio," I stated clearly, "and these designs are not hers, they are mine." With that simple declaration, my assistant triggered the presentation. The screens behind Julianne transformed, displaying side-by-side comparisons of my original sketches, alongside her altered versions. Every distinctive element, the flowing internal gardens, the light wells shaped like elongated teardrops, the community spaces that interlocked like puzzle pieces, appeared in perfect synchronicity across both versions. The timeline of internal emails appeared next. Remove Silas watermarks, rebuild in pastel palette, just revise final page structure. Then came the grant applications bearing my forged signature, followed by metadata evidence, IP access logs, and login locations, all tracing back to Julianne's headquarters. Gasps rippled through the audience. Phones emerged as journalists began capturing the unfolding scandal. A representative from Urban Leap approached the stage, discreetly removing Julianne's name card from the honor board. I looked directly into the camera lenses trained on my face. "I didn't come here to create conflict," I said, my voice steady. "I came to restore the truth they tried to erase." With a respectful nod to the stunned MC, I returned the microphone and walked off stage as chaos erupted. Julianne stood motionless, caught in the spotlight that now felt more like an interrogation lamp. Madeline's face contorted with fury. Irwin was already on his phone, no doubt calling crisis managers. As I exited the hall, I overheard a guest say to her companion, "So she actually stole from her ex-husband." My phone vibrated with a news alert. "Breaking: Routhford Foundation faces investigation for design. Copyright fraud." I stepped into the cool October night, the same night air I'd sat in hours earlier preparing for this moment. But now something had shifted. The weight I'd carried for 9 years had transferred. Not discarded, but redirected to where it truly belonged. The most devastating revenge isn't delivered with rage. It's presented with calm certainty, backed by irrefutable facts, in front of the very audience they cultivated to witness their fabricated glory. In the 24 hours following the gala, I maintained complete silence while the world erupted around me. Media outlets ran continuous coverage. Fashion icon, Julianne Routhford, accused of stealing designs from ex-husband. Our firm's name, Clay & Wren, suddenly became one of the most searched terms in architecture and design circles. The Routhford Foundation quietly deactivated all social media accounts as sponsors began withdrawing support, with carefully worded statements about integrity in creative partnerships. Julianne issued no response. Her silence spoke volumes. Madeline hired crisis PR attorneys within hours. But public opinion moved faster than even the most expensive damage control. The narrative had already solidified successful woman steals designs from discarded husband builds. Empire on stolen blueprints. I watched it unfold from my office, declining all interview requests. This wasn't about me having the final word. This was about the truth having its own voice. Within a week, young artists had gathered outside Julianne's New York flagship store holding signs that read, "Stop Art Theft," and "Credit the Creator." Photos circulated online showing empty aisles in what had once been the city's most exclusive retail space. Madeline's name disappeared from the board rosters of two major charitable foundations, a social death sentence in her circles. Irwin sold his company shares and relocated to Italy, citing investment expansion opportunities, though industry insiders recognized a strategic retreat from American media scrutiny. The Rutherford Empire hadn't collapsed wealth that established rarely does, but it had lost something more valuable than money credibility. Throughout this public unraveling, I maintained my silence. No interviews, no social media posts, no victory laps. Clay and Wren issued a single statement. "We believe truth speaks through design, not words." Modern Habitat magazine ran a cover story titled "Silas Wren, the man who rebuilt his honor with concrete and light." I didn't contribute to the piece. There was no need to narrate what was already visible in my work. 6 months after the gala, Terrence Duvall and I launched the Second Sketch Foundation, an organization dedicated to protecting independent designers' intellectual property. We assembled a small but formidable team. 2 IP attorneys who'd fought corporate giants, a digital forensics expert who specialized in metadata authentication, and 5 architects who had experienced theft or erasure of their contributions. The foundation offered free legal consultations, an accessible copyright registration system, and workshops teaching designers how to protect their work. We operated from a converted warehouse, the same space where I'd once displayed those 5 sketches that changed my trajectory. You could have destroyed them completely. Terrence said one evening as we finalized the foundation's charter, "Why stop at just exposing the truth?" "Because obliteration wasn't the point," I replied. "Recognition was." A year later, I was judging a student exhibition in Portland when I encountered Julianne. She stood alone before a student's concept model. No entourage, no designer clothes, no carefully curated persona. Just a woman studying architecture with what looked like genuine interest. She noticed me before I could retreat. "I sent an apology email," she said quietly. "You never responded." I really looked at her for the first time in years. The woman who had once been the center of my universe now occupied no more space in my life than any stranger. "I've finished writing that chapter of my life, Julianne," I said simply. "You're no longer in the final paragraph." I walked away without bitterness, without looking back. The wound had finally closed, not because it had healed perfectly, but because I no longer defined myself by its presence. These days I work at a drafting table in a home I designed myself, large windows overlooking a city gradually renewing itself. Each morning I open a fresh sketchbook, not to prove anything. Not for revenge, but to create what hasn't existed before. I don't need anyone to remember my name. I only need my buildings to exist, so that people who once had their voices stolen might find places to speak again. Clay and Wren recently signed a contract to develop the first community-owned sustainable urban district in Southern California, a project that will house 3,000 residents in spaces designed for connection rather than isolation. The Second Sketch Foundation helped a high school immigrant student successfully sue a major brand for stealing her hand-drawn designs. The settlement funded her college education at the architecture program of her choice. Urbanist Weekly perhaps captured it best. Silas Wren didn't reclaim what was stolen. He created something new, something that can't be stolen. Sometimes I think about that night in the Fairwood Heights parking lot, sitting in my car, gathering courage. I had arrived seeking justice for my stolen past. I left having secured a foundation for others' futures. The most powerful structures aren't built with vengeance. They're built with vision, deliberately, silently, one carefully placed stone at a time. Not to tower over what once hurt you, but to shelter what might otherwise remain vulnerable. After all, that's what real architecture has always been about. Not the architect's name on the cornerstone, but the lives that unfold within the spaces we create.